Children create before they compare. A child bends over a page with a crayon held tightly in one hand. The sun is purple. The house leans. The person beside it is larger than the tree. Nothing has been drawn to scale. And for a little while, none of that matters. There is no audience standing between the hand and the page. There is only absorption. Then, gradually, another presence enters the room. Maybe through a grade, a correction, a laugh, a comparison. Maybe through praise that teaches the child which kind of creation receives attention. The page hasn't changed, but the child's relationship to it has. Creation becomes observation of the self creating. One part of us lives, another watches. One part speaks, another asks how the speech was received. One part wants, another decides whether the desire will make us look foolish. Somewhere along the way, many of us learn to experience ourselves from the imagined position of an audience. We compare before we create, anticipate judgment before we speak, measure an impulse before allowing it to take form. What began as participation becomes performance, and this is where the sun becomes more interesting than the card of happiness. Because the sun doesn't merely promise that things will become brighter, it illuminates. It makes visible what's already there. That is its comfort, but it's also its challenge. Because people don't hide for no reason. We learn that our environments, we learn what it will permit. We learn which emotions make the room uncomfortable, which forms of intelligence can be recognized, which differences complicate belonging, which versions of us make passes easier. Performance isn't always vanity. Sometimes it's adaptation. Sometimes it's how we learn to remain connected to people and places we needed. But an adaptation can protect us long after we've forgotten what it was protecting us from. And eventually, a quieter question appears. Can I recognize myself inside the version of me I learned to present? The desire to be seen isn't shallow. It's human. The difficulty begins when being seen requires us to become someone we can no longer inhabit. That is why the sun asks for something more demanding than confidence. It asks for visibility, not exposure, not endless disclosure, not making every private thing available for inspection. Visibility isn't the absence of boundaries. To become unconcealed is something different. It is to stop treating an essential part of yourself as evidence against your worth. A person can be quiet and unconcealed. Another can stand before thousands of people and remain almost entirely hidden. Visibility isn't measured by volume. It's measured by the distance between what you know inwardly and the life you allow yourself to inhabit outwardly. The sun doesn't ask you to become the center of every room. Its deeper question is whether you can become present without turning presence into superiority. Whether you can shine without requiring someone else to dim. Whether another person's radiance can exist without becoming evidence of your insufficiency. The goal isn't permanent centrality. It is undivided presence. Because performance isn't always listening for the verdict. Was I admired? Was I understood? Was I chosen? Did this version of me secure the belonging I needed? Radiance begins somewhere else. Performance constructs a self that can survive the audience. Radiance inhabits a self that no longer requires the audience to issue a verdict. That doesn't mean the audience disappears. There will still be judgment, misunderstanding, rooms that cannot welcome what becomes visible. People who prefer the version of you that asks less of their understanding. The sun can't promise acceptance. Light has never possessed that power. It can only make seeing possible. And perhaps that's why the courage the sun represents is the courage to become less divided. Not fearless, not untouched by comparison, less divided. Which brings us back to the child. Not because childhood was innocent, and not because adulthood should somehow return to us to a life without discernment, skill, consequence, or responsibility. We know things now that the child did not. We know what it means to fail, to be criticized, to make something we care about and watch someone misunderstand it. We know the vulnerability of allowing what matters to us become visible. Perhaps that's why participation requires a different courage now. The child moved before the imagined audience had learned to speak so loudly. We have to move while hearing it, to create before it has finished judging, to speak before it is finished predicting the response, to allow desire to exist before deciding what having that desire says about us. Perhaps that's what we miss. Not childhood itself, participation. The ability to enter an experience before turning ourselves into its spectator. Wonder may still be looking for a shape. Expression may never have left us. Perhaps it's only learned to wait until the room felt safe. And not every room will be safe. Not every expression will be understood. Not everything the light reveals will be welcomed. But unconcealment was never a guarantee of applause. It was the decision that the imagined audience would no longer have total authority over what you permit yourself to become. Before you ask whether you're enough, whether you're impressive, whether you're ready, or whether anyone will understand what is taking shape, remember what the child knew for one absorbed moment. Creation didn't begin with permission. The sun doesn't ask you to become extraordinary. It asks you to stop hiding what's already true.